Alright, so today I decided to talk about the top 5 decks in the meta. Year has just concluded and the NAWCQ is coming up, so I wanted to pinpoint the 5 strategies that I feel like are the best ones that you really need to know how to play against, Site 4 and all of that. So please share your thoughts if you feel like there are any other important matchups I should be mentioning and decks overall. And of course, if you like the video, if you feel like it's helpful, please make sure to like it because it really does help out the channel. So with that, we are going to get started with the first deck, which is going to be Kashtira. Now we need to talk about it because it does have a very high representation every single time it competes. So it really goes to show that the deck is something you have to prepare for. The strength of the deck lies in its ability to create boards without committing too much resources. So you still have enough follow-up. And what I really like about it is that you can really decide what you want to do. You can throw everything at the board if you want and end on Arise card, even multiple Shangri-Ira and other cards like Fenrir or Unicorn or whatever, but you can hold your resources because it's going to be quite hard to go through your board with the likes of, like I mentioned before, Fenrir, Unicorn, cards in hand, which are a lot of non-engine as well because the deck is able to play those. And I feel like the pilot has to be skilled enough to really realize and like recognize in which situations they are, what deck they're up against, what player they're up against, to like diversify their end boards. So you do need to make some decisions, but the options for you are definitely there. And Arise card is still an insane monster, a very formidable card, which is hard to go up against a lot of times with different strategies. And not to mention, your going second isn't bad either. You have cards like, well, you have Zeus, and then you have like many ways of getting to Zeus, and you have cards like Big Eye, and overall, just a simple Fenrir on board is going to put enough pressure on it, I feel like, to really prompt your opponent to interact with you. So the deck is nice. It may be a little annoying to some people, but it's still at the forefront of the meta, at least in my opinion. And the next couple of decks are going to be Sprite Runic variants. So the first one is going to be for hire, and this deck is really cool. It rewards really good gameplay. So if you're a fan of runic cards, of drawing a lot, of playing a mid-range style, then this deck is 100,000% for you. You do need to make good choices, I think. Overall, with Runic plus engine decks, and it was the case with like Runic Naturia, etc., you need to play it well, but because you draw a ton, you're almost always going to have access to all 3 engines. And the second you get to all 3 engines, it's going to be really hard to stop you. So with For Hire, for example, you have all the Sprite cards doing their thing. You have runic cards, which always act as pseudo non-engine actually, so they make your going second a little easier, and also just overall being able to disrupt your opponent here and there. It's really, really nice. And not to mention that not only are you like destroying cards, negating and doing all the rooting effects, you're also just effectively taking your opponent's resources every single time you play a runic card. And when you banish enough cards from the top of their deck, either you take away enough important like key pieces that they cannot continue because they're out of resources, or you just simply outdeck them, which is also a thing. Now the deck can put up like boards or damage on board, I should say, but it's not the main objective of the deck to battle necessarily, although it's able to do so. And it also has a couple slots to play some non-engine on top of everything else that you're playing, which you inevitably draw into because you draw a ton. So like I said, in my opinion, it does take a skill pilot, but the deck is really, really interesting. And we actually do have 6 decks on this list because I do want to mention the Life Twin Runic Sprite variant, but it's sort of in the same category as the For Hire one, so almost the same deck, but not entirely. The main difference is that basically with this deck, you have the Evil Twin, Life Twin package, which really makes it so you have a lot of starters. Every single time you're going to be able to get your plays going, but then the end boards are a little different. So with this one, you end on both links, so you again draw, you pop, you do all of that, and then you have the Sprite cards, you have the Runic cards, of course, waiting in hand to be activated, but you can also make Griffin, and I think it's really cool because a lot of decks just struggle to go up against Nightmare Griffin, which you easily go into because of IP. So the deck is like, it does slightly different things than the For Hire variant, and you can really decide what you want to do. I think the non-engine slots, like the space for non-engine, is almost the same, so it's pretty much up to you what you want to be doing, but I did want to mention this deck as well because it is very similar, and the Life Twin cards do bring a lot to the table. And with the next deck on this list, we're going to be focusing on Bestial Dragons. So this deck was like, it was just a really cool surprise because it was featured a lot during Euros, so it really had the time to shine on stream and show why it is a really good deck in the format. Now, probably the number one thing are Bestios, because they do two things. Number one, because of Bestios, you have quite a good matchup across the board, and you really need to have many good matchups in a diverse meta, and I feel like when it comes to some of the top strategies, Bestial Dragon Link is a really good contender to go up against those. But Bestios are also part of your engine. They make it so you very easily go to Synchro 10s, so you're able to summon Baron, Despotter, Chaos Angel, all of that. And also overall just being dragons and just giving something to your strategy. You can like go to the Hieratic Xyz to summon something from the deck. It just gives you more options. It does take a very skilled pilot to play the deck, because when you look at Dragon Link, the combos aren't exactly set in stone. You kind of know what you're trying to do, and then you go from like checkpoint to checkpoint, but there's different cards that take you there, and of course if you get disrupted it's even harder. So yeah, if you practice a ton with the deck, it's going to be very, very rewarding. And what I really like about it is also that it does have a lot of pressure on the board. It is a combo deck. It puts up a board, but it also has enough space to play non-engine, so you have cards in hand as well, because sometimes it's just kind of lame when you like get Dark Rulered and your entire board is pretty much dead. They still have to deal with it somehow, but you know, if you have hand traps on top of that, that's of course a very cool thing. And when it comes to the boards, they usually consist of Savage, a Borderland Dragon, there's also Baron, sometimes Despotter. The only thing, like the only couple of issues with the deck are Draw and also Shifter, and the Rise Heart isn't the easiest to deal with, but I feel like if you know those are the, I guess, downsides to your deck, and you really build the deck and keep in mind that you have to somehow mitigate those, then it's going to be fine. So most definitely one of the best contenders right now. And moving on to the next deck, it's going to be Labyrinth. Now, we had to mention it, but it is quite low on this list because it doesn't have the greatest runic matchup, and runics are everywhere right now. But what really makes the deck interesting is the many different ways you can play it. So it is essentially, of course, a control deck. You can play it very trap heavy if you want, because a lot of your normal trap cards are very, very strong. And you can also play Eradicator and Skill Drain, and you can do those types of things if you want. If you don't really care, I would recommend it because it's really strong, but some people are kind of like, they hate on those cards. So if you don't care, it's fine. But other than that, you can play it as sort of a combo control-ish type of deck with all the furniture, so the other in-archetype monsters, because then you can get to Chaos Angel, and you can just like I said, it's combo sort of meets control. And what's really cool about that is the fact that it's very hard to combat both aspects of the deck. So it's a very, very interesting deck in this meta. And I do think it takes a skilled pilot to control the game very well. I think it takes a lot of skill to play either combo or control. So you really need to know all your matchups, because if you have all of your trap cards at your disposal, you need to decide when you're disrupting your opponent. And that's not the easiest thing to do every single time. So definitely a cool deck. If that's something that like floats your boat, you can play that. And for the last deck, I wanted to mention Rika, of course. So the Rika Sun Avalon deck is on this list, of course, but it is the last one. Because in my opinion, it did win Euros, but it didn't win them because it would be way too OP, but because the pilot was really good. Overall, the pilot makes the deck 100%, but when it comes to Rika, I genuinely think it's almost more important. Like, the pilot needs to be really, really good because it is a good combo deck. But there are so many decisions that go into your plays, and you really need to think a couple steps ahead and really decide what cards you're playing around. And if you get disrupted, what you're going to be doing, because the end boards are like, it's interesting. You can put up an end board of like a ton of things, like your opponent is not breaking that. But sometimes you can just put up a couple things and it's going to be enough because your disruptions are so diversified. And I really like this about the deck as well, but it does take a good pilot to achieve that. And of course, like I said, you have broken cards. The field spell is insane and all your interruptions are quite varied. So you have all the monsters, excuse me, you have all the monsters, And then you have Princess in the Graveyard, you have Rika Sheet set. The field spell, like I said, is incredible. So you have many different things to disrupt the opponent, and that's cool because they're not going to be able to deal with every single thing. They would realistically need to side in way too many cards and risk bricking, which isn't ideal. The deck is also quite hard to disrupt to some inexperienced players because they still don't really know how to play against it. But you need to keep in mind that if you're trying to play it very competitively, that at the top tables, everyone's going to know what you're doing. So I think what you need to really be focusing on is practicing the deck a lot. And once you get really comfortable with it, I feel like it can offer you a ton. So definitely a deck worth looking into. I don't personally think it's getting hit because the pilot is really what makes it. So yeah, it's also quite budget friendly, so you can also pick it up because of that reason if you want. And yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for this list. So hopefully this gave you a bit of an idea what the decks are trying to accomplish, what type of decks they are, so you know how to disrupt them. Some of the most important cards in the meta are going to be like board breakers and a couple of hand traps as well, like I mentioned, role shifter, all of that. So hopefully you gained some information, and if you did, please feel free to share that in the comments down below, also alongside your own ideas about the top decks, the top strategies and all of that. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.